Welcome, my family. Before we jump in, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. I'd also love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Please hype me on YouTube. Thanks. I never thought moving into a new home would feel like a warning. From the moment I stepped inside, I felt something I couldn't name, like the house exhaled when I crossed the threshold, and I was breathing in something stale, left behind, waiting. People talk about new beginnings when families blend, about patience and adjustments, but what I lived through in those 3 months with my new stepdaughter, it wasn't natural. It wasn't grief, or stubbornness, or childhood defiance. It was something else, something alive. My name is Aisha Menon, 34, a freelance web designer who always prided herself on logic and control. I married Samir, a civil engineer, 6 months ago. We'd met during a road project in Pune, when our lives briefly intersected on dusty work sites and late-night planning sessions. He listened in a way most men don't. Really listened, like every word mattered. It was his steadiness, his quiet patience that drew me toward him like a moth to a safe flame. After years of solitude, I thought I had found my place. And then there was Tara, his daughter, 8 years old. His caution around her had been understandable. Her mother had died unexpectedly the year before. He'd told me she needed time. He wanted to protect her grief, her innocence. I respected that. So when I finally met her, months after our engagement, I wanted so badly for it to go well. I remember her like a painting that first day. Pale skin, solemn eyes too large for her face, hair black as coal. She was polite, quiet, too quiet. But I mistook it for shyness. I told myself she would warm to me. I was wrong. We moved into a bungalow on the outskirts of Lonavala, perched at the edge of wooded hills, where fog drifted heavy in the mornings and cicadas screamed in the evenings. Samir's idea, a peaceful place for Tara. The house was old but beautiful. High ceilings, carved teak doors, winding staircases. I fell in love with it instantly, blind to the way its shadows clung a little too long, the way the air always seemed heavier than outside. The first weeks were quiet. Tara kept mostly to herself, attending her online classes, eating in silence, disappearing into her room for hours. She didn't watch TV, didn't play outside. Her obsession was dolls. She had dozens scattered across her room like a small museum of faces, perched on windowsills, propped against pillows, hanging from strings above her bed. Some handmade, some bought, all watching. One night, while unpacking in the attic, I found an old wooden chest. Dust, cobwebs, the smell of mothballs. I pried it open, expecting blankets or junk. Instead, it held a dozen vintage dolls, chipped, cracked, their glass eyes clouded with age, some missing limbs, some smiling too wide. I recoiled, but when Tara saw them, her face lit up in a way I had never seen before. "These were mine," she whispered, as though greeting old friends. I glanced at Samir. He only smiled, gentle, reassuring. "She's been through so much," he murmured. "If these make her feel safe, let her have them." Safe. The word clanged in my chest like irony. Those dolls didn't make me feel safe. They made me feel watched. The first incident was small. I was alone, midday, sunlight filling the kitchen as I scrubbed dishes. Samir was at work, Tara at school. That was when I heard it, soft humming, childlike, distant, a melody that drifted from upstairs. I froze, hands dripping soap and water. "Tara?" I called out too sharply. Silence answered. I went upstairs, the wooden steps groaning beneath me. Her door was ajar. I pushed it open, empty. The air smelled faintly of dust and lavender. The dolls, though, they weren't as I'd left them. The cluster by the window had moved. They were now sitting in a perfect circle on the floor, a porcelain tea set in the middle. One I knew hadn't been there before. My chest tightened. I told myself Tara must have arranged them earlier, but unease lodged inside me like a thorn. Days passed. Tara's behavior shifted, subtle at first, then sharper. She watched me, not with curiosity, but with something colder, like calculation. She whispered to her dolls, too low for me to hear. Once, passing her room, I caught a fragment. "She's not ready yet." The words drilled into me. Not ready for what? At dinner, I asked gently, "Tara, who are you talking to when you play?" Her fork hovered, her eyes steady. "My real mommy," she said calmly. "She lives in the walls." I froze. Samir chuckled, breaking the tension. "She means in her memories," he said, ruffling her hair. But her eyes didn't leave mine. She hadn't meant memories. I knew it. A week later, while changing her bedsheets, I found a drawing under her pillow. 3 stick figures, one clearly Tara, one clearly Samir. The third had X's for eyes, red crayon smeared all over its head. Beneath, a single word scrawled in block letters, Aisha. I asked her, soft, careful, "Did you draw this, sweetheart?" She smiled, eerie in its stillness. "She told me to." "Who told you?" I whispered. "The one who wears your face." That night I dreamed of myself. Not me exactly, but a version, grinning, eyes hollow, skin crudely stitched. She stood at the foot of Tara's bed, brushing her hair as Tara whispered, "Make her go away." I woke drenched in sweat, heart hammering, and locked our bedroom door for the first time. Samir noticed my nerves. "You're just adjusting. She's processing her grief. It'll get better." It didn't. One afternoon, while dusting Tara's room, I found a new doll. I froze. It was a miniature of me. Same hair, same clothes, but the face was half melted, charred, and the hands were stained red. I dropped it, bile rising. That night, scratching started. Faint, like mice. Then louder, dragging nails inside the walls. I shook Samir awake. "Do you hear that?" He sat up, confused. "Hear what?" The noise stopped. Silence pressed against us. He sighed, rubbed his face. I wanted to scream. I started documenting everything. The drawings, the whispers, the dolls. Samir grew tense, frustrated. "Aisha, I think you're not well. You're imagining this." "You think I'm making this up?" "She's not just a child, Samir. She's possessed." The word hung heavy between us. His face hardened. He slept on the couch. 2 nights later, he left for a 3-day site inspection in Nashik. I begged him not to go. "Please don't leave me here alone." He kissed my forehead. "She's just a child." No, she wasn't. The house was too quiet without him. Shadows seemed longer. I cooked dinner, called for Tara. No reply. I found her upstairs, cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by dolls. In her lap sat the burnt-faced doll that looked like me. "Tara, it's dinner time." She didn't move. "Tara?" She turned slowly. Her eyes, black, glossy, endless, no whites left. "She's almost ready," Tara whispered. "We just need the rest of your face." I stumbled back, heart pounding. I locked myself in the bedroom, shaking, dialing Samir's number. No signal. The lights flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed me. Then, a voice, soft, sing-song right outside the door. "Mommy, it's tea time." Scratching started against the wood, methodical, slow carving letters. I turned on my flashlight. The word "stay" emerged on the door, fresh and raw. The smell hit next, burnt hair, burnt flesh. I opened the closet, desperate for something. My breath caught. My clothes were gone. In their place, dozens of doll limbs stitched together, dangling from coat hangers. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke at dawn. Sunlight, birds, as if nothing had happened. I crept to Tara's room. She sat on her bed, blankets pulled to her chin. The dolls were gone, her eyes wide, fearful. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" I asked, voice shaking. "She was using me, but she likes you now." My stomach twisted. "Who?" She smiled faintly. Behind her, the mirror rippled like water. My reflection blinked, but I hadn't. That was 3 weeks ago. Samir returned to a quiet house. Tara cheerful, me composed. I cleaned everything. No drawings, no dolls, no evidence. He believed me when I said I just needed rest, but I know better. I watch the mirror sometimes. My reflection doesn't always move with me. Sometimes her smile lingers longer, her eyes darker. Sometimes late at night, when my breath is steady, a sweet child's voice whispers, "It's tea time, Mommy." And I whisper back, "I know." I grew up in a house that didn't just hold us, it listened. The siding was beige, the roof sloped in a modest way, the yard trimmed just enough to keep the neighbors quiet, and roses bloomed in the little patch beside the driveway. But those flowers always seemed too still, their petals stiff, like they were waiting for something. Everyone in Ashwood, Oregon thought the house on Maple Drive was ordinary, a safe place where a family could build routines and stability. But I knew better, even before I had words for it. The walls soaked up every word, every mistake, every secret, and gave them back in ways I could never explain. My stepmother, Margaret, wasn't the kind of woman who tolerated disorder. At least that's what she told herself. I thought of her as strict, demanding. But over time I realized her rules weren't just about control. They felt like offerings, rituals she performed to keep something inside the house pleased. Floors scrubbed until my knees ached, mirrors wiped until I couldn't recognize the girl looking back. Towels folded with sharp edges like they'd cut you if you touched them wrong. She enforced precision, but her precision had an edge of desperation, like she was afraid of what might happen if she slipped. My younger brother, Ethan, carried the weight of it most. He was 10, fragile, with the kind of small, nervous body that seemed made for punishment. Margaret would run baths for him, the water steaming hot, the soap sharp with chemical scent, and she'd scrub his skin until it turned blotchy red. He whimpered, begged her to stop, but her grip never faltered. I stood in the doorway once, horrified, and tried to intervene. She turned to me with eyes too bright, too unblinking, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw fear flicker there. Not fear of me, but of something else watching. Then she slapped me hard across the face. The sound was so loud it felt like the walls themselves echoed it back, sealing the moment into memory. My father, Greg, barely existed in this story. He worked long hours as an accountant, came home with tired eyes, and accepted Margaret's order as law. Sometimes he noticed. He would glance at Ethan's skin, raw from scrubbing, or at the way my body tensed whenever Margaret's footsteps passed. A shadow of concern crossed his face, but then it was gone, smothered beneath resignation. He didn't want to see, or maybe he couldn't. The house wouldn't let him. School didn't save me either. I flinched too often, spoke too softly, avoided laughter. Fear is contagious. Friends sensed it and drifted away. Only one girl, Lily, stuck close for a while. I invited her over once, desperate for something normal. For a little while, it worked. We sat cross-legged on my bed, whispering about crushes, about how math was impossible. Then Margaret appeared without a sound, like the walls had parted to let her in. She inspected the kitchen, corrected my posture in front of Lily, made Ethan scrub the counters until he cried. Lily left quietly, almost running. The next day at school, she avoided my eyes. After that, I stopped asking anyone to come over. It was around then that I found the journals. They were tucked away in a drawer in the hallway console, hidden but not well enough. Their covers were plain, cracked leather, pages yellowed at the edges. I opened one out of curiosity, and what I read made my skin crawl. Detailed notes about us, me, Ethan, even Greg, times, habits, thoughts that no one could have known. Ethan looked at the window, 4:16 p.m., wanted to run. She chose too quickly, punishment required. My chest tightened, nausea rising. These weren't just observations. They were private things, things no one could have seen. And yet here they were, written in Margaret's tight, slanted hand, or maybe not quite hers. The strokes looked strained, like her hand had been forced. I shoved the journal back into the drawer and tried to forget, but I couldn't. Every time Margaret's eyes landed on me, and I wondered if she already knew what I was thinking, if the house had whispered it to her. Things escalated slowly, like a rope tightening around my throat. One rainy night, I crept downstairs for a piece of bread. Hunger gnawed at me. The house groaned under the weight of the storm, beams creaking as though the wind wasn't outside but moving through the walls themselves. I reached for the refrigerator, and behind me, Margaret's voice cut the air. "Hands off the fridge. You touch anything without gloves and you'll regret it." I froze. Her figure stood in the doorway, but she wasn't just Margaret. The light didn't touch her correctly. It bent around her edges, leaving parts of her darker than shadow. She stared at me, lips moving, but the sound didn't come from her throat. It came from somewhere deeper, vibrating through the floorboards like the house was speaking through her. And then, just as quickly, it was gone. Her lips were still, her eyes glassy. She blinked, and for the smallest second, I thought she looked terrified too. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, listening. The house breathed. I could hear it, faint and rhythmic, as though the walls had lungs. At one point, I swore someone exhaled right by my ear, cold breath brushing my skin. When I jerked upright, the room was empty, but the air was too heavy, like it hadn't yet settled from being disturbed. I began to notice smaller things. A door left ajar when I knew I'd shut it. Picture frames tilted slightly, even though I'd just straightened them. Reflections in the polished glass seemed delayed, moving just after I did. Their smiles sharper, hungrier. At first I told myself it was exhaustion, stress, fear. But then I found my own notebook, my private writing, filled with sentences I hadn't written. Words in Margaret's script, repeating the same line over and over. "You can't escape. The house is in you now." That was when I decided. Ethan and I couldn't wait for anyone to save us. We had to leave. I whispered the plan to him one night. "We're leaving. Tonight." He nodded without hesitation, his small fingers clutching mine so tightly my knuckles ached. Together we moved through the house, careful of every creak. The walls seemed to close in around us, groaning louder, as though they knew. Margaret's voice drifted from her room, muttering, low, too fast, almost chanting. For a second I thought I heard another voice layered beneath hers, deeper, older. We reached the front door. I twisted the knob slowly, praying it wouldn't squeal. When the door opened, a gust of cold air slammed against us, filled with the smell of wet earth and something sharper, metallic, like blood. We bolted into the storm, rain pelting our skin, our shoes slapping against the asphalt. Behind us the house loomed, its windows glowing faintly though no lights were on. I didn't look back again. The shelter was only a few blocks away, a small brick building with a cross above the door. Its warm light cut through the rain like salvation. Inside, volunteers wrapped us in blankets, pressed steaming cocoa into our hands. The air smelled of disinfectant and coffee, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. Ethan leaned against me, trembling, and I whispered over and over, "We're safe. We're safe now." But safety didn't last. The social workers came, asked questions, took notes. I told them everything. The rules, the baths, the journals. They believed me enough to act. They sent people to search the house. But when they came back, they said they found nothing. No journals, no evidence. The house had erased its tracks, like it was daring me to prove it. Therapy started soon after. At first I couldn't speak. My counselor filled the silence with gentle words, and slowly, I began to answer. I told her about the journals, the whispers, the way Margaret's eyes sometimes looked like she was someone else's prisoner. The counselor nodded, her expression unreadable. When I finished, I felt lighter, but the fear never fully left. At night in the shelter, I woke to strange sounds, faint scratching like nails on wood. Sometimes I found myself sitting up in bed with a pen in hand, words scrawled across the page. You will come home. Weeks turned into months. Ethan and I were placed in foster care with a family who smelled of vanilla candles and pine cleaner. They were kind, patient. Their rules were gentle, understandable. I began to laugh again, cautiously. But then, one afternoon I found something under my pillow, a small leather-bound journal, cracked at the edges. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first entry read, "She found me again. She still belongs to us." I dropped it on the floor, my breath ragged. When I picked it up again, the pages were blank. The weeks in the foster home should have felt like freedom, but instead they felt like borrowed air. Thin, stale, not enough to fill my lungs. The other kids laughed in the halls, slammed doors, shared gum and secrets, but I kept waiting for the rhythm of Margaret's steps, for the creak of the stair under her heel, for the snap of her voice. The silence was louder than any of it, and I kept jerking awake at night, convinced I'd hear her calling my name. That's when I saw it. On the nightstand beside my bed, tucked under a book I hadn't touched, lay one of the journals. The leather cover cracked in the exact place my thumb had bent it, the ribbon folded to a page I had read. I hadn't brought it. I knew I hadn't. I told myself maybe it had slipped into the box of my clothes, overlooked during the move. But when I opened it, the words on the page weren't the ones I remembered. They were my words. A scrawled account of arriving at the foster house, the way the windows rattled in the wind, the way Mrs. Kearns, the foster mother, smiled without really looking at me. My handwriting, but not written by me. I flipped the pages in a panic and found the same entry copied 3 times, each more distorted, the letters curling, warping like vines tightening around the lines. The next morning it was gone. I searched everywhere, ripping clothes from drawers, scattering books. But the journal had disappeared as though it had never existed. Mrs. Kearns scolded me for the mess, said I'd have to earn back trust if I wanted privacy. She couldn't see the desperation in my shaking hands. She couldn't hear the house in my chest. Nights blurred. I started sleepwalking, or at least that's what they told me. I'd wake with the taste of soap on my tongue, my knuckles raw, my nails filled with dirt. Once I found myself crouched in the kitchen, scrubbing the floor tiles until they gleamed, muttering Margaret's words under my breath. A clean house keeps the devil out. But the more I cleaned, the more the dirt seemed to grow. Shadows in corners deepened. Greasy fingerprints smudged walls I'd just wiped. And in the grain of the wood, if I stared too long, I swore I saw letters carving themselves into place. I told the social worker once. She smiled in that bright, pitying way adults have when they think they're soothing you. "It's trauma," she said. "Your mind is trying to process what you went through. Dreams feel real sometimes." She didn't see the splinter in my palm that hadn't been there the night before. She didn't see the faint ring of red around my wrist where the keys used to hang. Then one night I woke with the journal back in my lap. The page open, my pen gripped in my fist, ink smeared across my fingers. The words were simple, scratched hard into the paper, letters carved deep. "You are home." I dropped the book like it burned me, heart hammering so loud I thought it would wake the house. But when I ran to Mrs. Kearns's room, the journal was gone again. Her lamp clicked on, her eyes bleary, annoyed, and she told me if I kept disturbing the house at night, I'd be moved somewhere else. The way she said the house made me freeze. She hadn't meant it like that, I knew. But my skin crawled anyway. The next days twisted into each other. I started noticing things in Mrs. Kearns. The way she stared too long into corners. The way she muttered when she thought no one listened. The way her hand trembled once, clutching the banister, eyes wide as though she'd heard something I hadn't. For a moment, I saw Margaret in her posture, that stiff, haunted tilt of the shoulders. And I wondered, was she next? One night, I dreamed, or thought I dreamed, that Margaret stood at the foot of my bed. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, but she wasn't angry. She was afraid. Her lips moved, but her voice was not hers. It was the deep, dragging sound of the house itself, speaking through her skin. The vessel breaks. Another must open. I woke with tears streaking my face, my chest heaving. My hands ached, nails cracked, and when I looked at the wall beside my bed, there were scratches deep in the plaster. Not words this time, just marks. But when I leaned close, I could smell the wood beneath, musty, damp like the air under the stairs back in Margaret's house. The police had told me once that the house was just wood and nails. I wanted to believe that, but wood absorbs. Nails rust, houses remember, and so do I. Everywhere I go now, I hear faint things. A floorboard creak when no one's upstairs, a faint pressure in the walls, whispers that sound like my own voice answering back. Sometimes when I catch my reflection in the mirror, I don't recognize my eyes. They look too wide, too old, too much like Margaret's. And the worst part isn't the fear that the house followed me. The worst part is the gnawing thought that maybe it never had to. Maybe it was always inside me, waiting. The journal reappeared again yesterday. Only one line this time, written in that warped script. You keep me alive. I didn't throw it away. I couldn't. It sits in my drawer now, heavy, patient. I can feel it even when it's closed, like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to me. And at night, when the house is quiet, when everyone else breathes their steady sleep, I hear it turning its own pages. I don't know if I'm writing it, or if it's writing me. But I know this much. Some houses don't need walls. They live inside the ones who survive them. And I survived. I knew something was wrong the moment she smiled at me across the room. It wasn't the kind of smile you return automatically, the easy politeness exchanged between strangers. No, this one carried weight, an invisible hand pressing down on my chest, as if she knew me already, as if I belonged to her before I'd even said a word. I should have looked away, excused myself, pretended to need another drink, but instead I froze, watching the way her lips curled, the way her eyes fixed on me as though pinning me in place. Seattle had worn me down by then. 4 years in a city that smelled of damp concrete and overbrewed coffee, chasing auditions that paid in exposure or applause from a handful of strangers in dim theaters. I told myself I was building something, but really I was unraveling. Debts piling up, confidence thinning out, living in a studio apartment whose walls sweated mildew when the rain pressed too hard. Acting was supposed to fill the hollowness of my childhood, but lately it felt like the hollowness had won. I was desperate, and desperation has its own gravity. That's why I was at the charity gala that night, pretending to belong among people whose shoes probably cost more than my rent. And that's when Helena Whitmore walked straight into my life. You're Logan, aren't you? Her voice was smooth, deliberate, like each syllable had been polished before it left her lips. She tilted her head, studying me as if she'd been waiting. Yes, I managed, throat dry. I've heard about you. Your work has potential. The way she said potential cut me open. It wasn't praise. It was a challenge, a reminder of everything I hadn't become yet. Thank you, I said, because what else could I say? She leaned closer, perfume drifting between us, something floral but sharp, like jasmine left too long in the sun. Her eyes didn't blink. Potential is wasted on poverty. I can change that. It wasn't really a proposition. It was a verdict. That night marked the beginning of what I later understood as my undoing. She offered me stability, an apartment, freedom from the suffocating weight of bills in exchange for companionship. The word sounded harmless enough, almost quaint, but even then it carried a peculiar emphasis, as if she were offering more than she was saying, or less. I told myself no at first. I had survived this long on my own. I could keep going. But the part of me that counted every penny at the grocery store, the part of me that woke up at 3 a.m. with my chest tight from the panic of overdue rent, That part whispered yes. And so I agreed. Her apartment towered above Puget Sound, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing gray water that seemed endless. The space was sterile, too perfect, with its white walls and sculpted furniture. It felt like moving into a gallery where I was both guest and exhibit. The first weeks were intoxicating. Fine dining, sleek clothes, parties where people looked at me differently, simply because I was with her. Helena made me feel chosen, and that was a kind of drug. But drugs wear off. She began small. That friend of yours, she distracts you. Or, that shirt doesn't flatter you. Try this one instead. I told myself it was harmless, maybe even helpful, the guidance of someone who lived in a world I didn't understand. But every comment lodged itself inside me, until I couldn't tell where her taste ended and mine began. The first real crack came one stormy night. Rain lashed the windows, thunder rattling the glass. Helena staggered, clutching her chest, collapsing onto the couch. My panic spiked. I reached for my phone, but her hand shot out, icy against mine. No doctors. There are rituals. You'll help me. Her eyes glistened strangely, almost luminous in the flickering light. She whispered about energy, about draining weakness and feeding strength, about exchanges that could keep her young, keep her alive. My stomach turned, but I didn't move. I didn't know if she was delusional or something else, something darker. That was the first time I saw the cage beneath the gold. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, but instead of relief it felt surgical, exposing everything. Helena moved with new intensity, arranging objects, adjusting curtains, telling me where to stand to align with energy flow. Her world was ordered, precise, and I realized my place in it wasn't accidental. I was a piece in her design. When I tried to refuse a small ritual, just before breakfast, she wanted me to press my palms against hers and breathe in unison. Her smile faltered. "You must understand," she said, voice syrupy but edged with steel. "I only want what's best. For both of us." Her eyes lingered, sharp, as if measuring how much resistance I had left. I began to notice surveillance. A faint red blink in the corner of the ceiling. A lens disguised in a bookshelf ornament. Her questions seemingly innocent that revealed she knew details of my day I hadn't shared. My phone battery drained faster than it should. Calls dropped inexplicably. Even when she wasn't in the apartment, I felt watched. One evening, she took me to what she called the Circle, a gathering of young men in immaculate suits, all with the same brittle smiles, the same watchful eyes. They laughed at her jokes, nodded at her instructions, their movements slightly too synchronized. I saw myself in them, or what I was becoming. Companions, yes, but not partners. They were extensions, hollowed-out pieces molded to her will. From then on, storms terrified me, not because of the thunder, but because they became stages for her episodes. She would collapse, demand I participate in elaborate rituals that blurred the line between superstition and something more sinister. Candles, whispered incantations, her voice growing guttural at times, animal-like. She insisted it was for vitality, for connection. But as her hands pressed against mine, I swore I felt something tugging at me, siphoning pieces I couldn't name. I knew I had to leave. But her apartment was a trap disguised as luxury. Locks I couldn't override, doors that required codes, cameras that tracked me. Even when she wasn't home, I felt her presence saturating every surface. My rebellion had to be subtle, smiles, nods, small compliances. While inside, I studied her routines, memorized her patterns. I began documenting everything, writing notes in hidden places, sketching maps of her cameras, rehearsing routes in my head. The survival instinct sharpened me. My chance came one night when she attended an art gala across the city. I had minutes, maybe an hour. My hands shook as I packed essentials, each zip of the bag sounding like a gunshot. The stairwell smelled of dust and damp metal. My footsteps echoed too loudly, every creak of the door making me flinch. But somehow I made it outside. Rain poured, drenching me instantly, but it felt like baptism, like freedom washing me clean. I didn't stop running until the lights of the city swallowed me, until I was just another soaked figure among strangers. And for the first time in months, I breathed without permission. I went to therapy. I rebuilt slowly, like learning to walk after an accident. Sleep returned in fragments, trust in even smaller fragments. My friends, once pushed away, took me back cautiously, helping me remember how to exist without fear. But still, sometimes late at night I feel her eyes. I'll catch a glint in a window, a shadow lingering too long. My phone glitches, my lights flicker, and I wonder, did I ever truly escape? Or did Helena carve herself so deep into me that part of her still lives inside, waiting? Because sometimes, in the silence just before sleep, I hear her voice. Potential is wasted on poverty, I can change that. And I wonder if she was right. I should have turned around the moment I saw the house. Something in the way it stood at the end of the gravel drive, its white paint peeling in sheets like old skin, the windows staring blankly into the misty fields, made the air in my lungs thicken. But I told myself I was being silly, that meeting a boyfriend's mother shouldn't feel like stepping into a trap. I had always prided myself on my independence, on not letting fear dictate my choices. And yet, as the farmhouse loomed closer, that quiet confidence I had carried since childhood felt like it was dissolving, drop by drop, into something colder. My name is Vanessa, and if I sound certain now, it's only because hindsight gives everything an unnatural clarity. At the time, I clung to the story I'd been telling myself for months, that this visit was a natural step, that Ryan's family would welcome me, that the unease prickling the back of my neck was nothing more than travel nerves. But unease has a way of multiplying when ignored. It feeds in silence, in politeness, in the places where we refuse to trust ourselves. The drive out of Asheville had been long, the winding country roads shrouded in low fog. Pines pressed close to the roadside, their branches knitting together like hands, letting only narrow blades of gray light through. Ryan seemed at ease, one hand on the wheel, humming softly to some tune I didn't recognize. He talked about childhood memories, about fishing with his father before he passed, about his mother's eccentricities, delivered with a chuckle that was both affectionate and wary. He said, "She's strong-minded, that's all. You'll see." I tried to picture her, this Eleanor he described, but my imagination fell short. The reality hit me the second she opened the door. She was tall, poised, her hair pinned back in a way that showed every angle of her face. Her smile was wide, but too precise, as if it had been measured. "Vanessa, so wonderful to finally meet you." Her arms wrapped around me in a hug that was firm, almost constricting. Her perfume was sharp and medicinal, something that clung to my clothes after she released me. Inside, the house smelled of wood polish and roast meat. A normal home at first glance, lace curtains, gleaming picture frames, shelves lined with old books. But the longer I stood there, the more I noticed. No dust anywhere, not even on the highest ledges. No scuffs on the hardwood. Everything arranged at exact angles. The air carried a faint hum, like electricity just out of hearing range, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was listening. Dinner should have been an easy icebreaker. Instead, it was the first signal that something was wrong. The table groaned under Eleanor's cooking. Roast beef, thick gravy, buttered vegetables slick with sheen. Ryan had mentioned to her that I was vegetarian. She smiled at me, lifted the carving knife, and sliced into the beef anyway. "You'll change your mind," she said smoothly. When I declined, her smile tightened. "Quirky habits," she murmured, loud enough that Ryan glanced up but said nothing. As we ate, she corrected me. Not rudely, never directly rude, but constant. "Elbows in, dear. Sit up straight. Don't tilt the fork like that." Each remark chipped away at me until I felt like a child scolded in her classroom. Ryan tried to laugh it off, telling stories to cut the tension, but his mother's eyes never left me. That night, when I tried to excuse myself to bed, Eleanor followed. She insisted she needed to help me adjust. She brought a spoonful of gravy to my lips, pressing it against me until the greasy saltiness slid down my throat. My cheeks burned. I forced a smile, murmured thanks, but my heart pounded like a trapped bird. I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. The silence of the countryside should have been calming, but it was oppressive, broken only by the creaks of the old house. I could feel her gaze even through the walls. My breath caught at every shift of shadow. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down I knew. She wasn't just eccentric. She was watching, testing, pressing. Morning offered no reprieve. The kitchen was heavy with the smell of bacon and eggs. Eleanor turned from the stove, spatula in hand, smile fixed. "Morning, dear." I forced cheer into my voice, sat down with my oatmeal. She peered at it with a wrinkle of her nose. "Too little protein for a young woman. How will you ever fit in here?" I laughed lightly, explained again that I was vegetarian. Her eyes narrowed, but the smile didn't falter. She leaned close enough that her perfume burned my throat. "You'll get used to it eventually. This is a family home. We have our ways." Something in her tone chilled me. It wasn't suggestion, it was warning. The hours dragged. She hovered when I tried to read, stood too close when I folded towels, corrected the smallest gestures. Doors I thought I'd opened were shut again. Cupboards rattled when I reached for them, bolted without explanation. Ryan brushed it off. "She's always been particular. Don't take it personally." But I caught the flicker in his eyes, the tension he couldn't hide. He had grown up in this house. He had normalized it. That night, the line between reality and paranoia began to blur. I woke to the faint scrape of footsteps outside my door. I held my breath, the dark pressing in. A shadow shifted under the crack, tall, unmoving. Minutes stretched like hours until it faded. I told myself I had imagined it, but when I opened the door at dawn, there were damp prints on the floorboards, leading nowhere. Eleanor greeted me in the hall with the same precise smile. "Sleep well?" By then, my nerves were unraveling. Every sound seemed amplified. The hum of the refrigerator like a growl, the clocks ticking like a hammer. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked distorted, my face pale and stretched, though when I blinked, it returned to normal. The house itself felt complicit, shifting subtly when I wasn't looking, the air thicker in certain rooms as though refusing to let me pass. Ryan remained caught between us, torn, but blind. He defended her quirks, but his hands trembled when she corrected him too. One evening she cornered me in the hallway, spoon of gravy in hand like a weapon. "Tradition is survival," she whispered. I stepped back, my pulse thundering. Something in her eyes was hollow, as if she was only a vessel for something older. That night I planned my escape. Ryan slept deeply, oblivious. I crept into the kitchen, the air cold and metallic, grabbed his keys, and slipped into the fog. The house loomed behind me, silent but alive, its windows glinting faintly as though watching me go. The drive was endless. The mist pressed close, shapes shifting at the roadside. More than once I thought I saw Eleanor's silhouette among the trees, her perfect posture unbending, her smile unshaken. My hands clenched the wheel until my knuckles blanched. By the time I reached my apartment in the city, dawn was breaking. Relief came in waves, fragile but real. But escape doesn't erase what you've absorbed. For days I jumped at every creak of my own home, every shadow that stretched across the wall. I dreamed of Eleanor in the kitchen, smiling as she stirred something I couldn't see, the hum of the house vibrating through the walls. Ryan came to visit. I told him gently why I left. His hurt was genuine, but his understanding grew slowly. She's just my mom," he whispered, but the words faltered even in his mouth. Therapy helped me sort through the fear, the humiliation, the warped sense of self that had grown in that house. I learned to set firmer boundaries, to trust the alarms in my body. Yet some nights when I closed my eyes, I swore I could still smell her perfume, hear that hum in the walls. Time carried me forward. Ryan and I parted ways, kindly but inevitably. I focused on my studies, on healing. I reclaimed small victories, cooking my favorite meals, walking alone without fear. But trauma doesn't vanish, it lingers, a quiet thread running beneath ordinary days. The last time I dreamed of her, it was different. She wasn't in the kitchen. She was in my own apartment, standing in the corner, her smile as precise as ever. "You'll get used to it," she whispered, and the hum of her house filled my ears though I was miles away. I woke choking on the air, convinced for a heartbeat that she had followed me, that the house had claimed me too. And even now, as I tell this, I cannot fully say whether she was only a woman or whether the farmhouse itself was alive, feeding through her, waiting for the next guest to step through its door. Because sometimes independence is not enough. Sometimes the places we enter do not let us leave whole. And I wonder, when I drove away into the mist, did I really escape? Or did part of me stay behind, watching, smiling, waiting to welcome the next stranger with open arms? I used to think the worst thing in life was being forgotten, but now I know it's remembering too much. My name is Clara Walker, and if you're reading this, you'll probably think I'm unreliable, hysterical, dramatic, broken. Maybe you'd be right. I've asked myself that question 1,000 times. Did I make it all up? Did my mind twist ordinary love into something monstrous? Or was the horror real, seeping into me like poison I couldn't spit out? I grew up in a suburb called Maple Hollow, just outside Eugene, Oregon. People loved to say it was safe, that nothing bad ever really happened here. We had streets lined with maples, tidy porches with American flags, neighbors who waved from behind hedges trimmed too neatly to be real. But I learned young that appearances don't save you. They only hide the rot until it bursts through the walls. When I was 10, my mother vanished. Not died, not moved, vanished. Her name was Laura, and she was supposed to drive me to school that morning. I sat by the front door with my backpack, my shoes tapping the floor, listening for her footsteps. But when she never came down, I went to her room. The closet hung open, the drawers emptied. Gone. My father told me she left to clear her head, but weeks passed, then months, then years. No body, no call, no goodbye. I remember standing in that empty room, breathing in the faint trace of her perfume, powdery, floral, and feeling something I couldn't name then. A thin crack forming inside me, a split that never really healed. Dad, Daniel Walker, broke in his own way. He filled the silence with work. Double shifts, late nights, anything to keep from being in that house with me. He barely spoke, except for tired sighs or the occasional reminder to do my homework. I became the quiet girl at school, the one with a missing mom and a dad who looked like he hadn't slept in years. And then she appeared, Rebecca. Dad introduced her one Sunday afternoon, calling her a friend from the hospital. She was a nurse who had helped him after a back injury. She looked like someone from another world. Tall, copper blonde hair, eyes the color of moss after rain. Everything about her was soft. Her sweaters, her voice, the way she tilted her head when you spoke as if you were the most important person alive. At first, she just joined us for dinner. Then she stayed overnight. Then quietly she moved in. I didn't mind. I was lonely, and Rebecca filled the air with warmth again. She baked cookies, left notes in my lunchbox, sat by my bed when I got sick. She even framed my drawings and pinned them on the fridge. One day, without thinking, I called her mom. She smiled like sunlight through fog, and for the first time since Laura vanished, I felt like I belonged to a family again. But good things never last in Maple Hollow. Not for me. By the time I turned 15, I started getting sick. At first it was just headaches, then dizziness. I'd wake up exhausted, my limbs heavy, my body shrinking. I was pale, frail, and every meal tasted like ash. My doctor couldn't find anything wrong. He said maybe it's stress, maybe a virus. Rebecca held my hand in the waiting room and told me not to worry. At home, she sat at my bedside with steaming mugs of herbal tea and tall glasses of green smoothies. Detox blends, she called them. They'll flush out the bad things. You'll be strong again soon, Angel. The way she said Angel always caught in me, sweet but sharp like sugar melting over glass. Then she started controlling what I ate. Nothing unless she made it. No snacks, no food from friends. Just her teas, her smoothies, her soups. I didn't fight it at first. I was too weak, too tired. But a strange taste clung to everything, metallic, bitter. I felt worse, not better. The first time I noticed something was truly wrong was the night she brought out the syringe. I was lying in bed, skin clammy, head swimming, when she came in carrying her leather medical kit. I'd seen her use it before. Bandages, stethoscope, blood pressure cuff. But that night she drew out a syringe filled with a pale blue liquid that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. "This will help," she said gently, smiling. "It's just a little tonic. Think of it like a vitamin shot. You'll feel peaceful, no more pain." Something in me snapped awake. Fear sliced through the haze of sickness. "I don't want it," I whispered, sitting up. My heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs would break. Her smile faltered. For a second I saw something colder beneath her face, something brittle. Then she smoothed it back. "You're scared, that's all. Trust me, Clara. I would never hurt you." But when she stepped closer, the syringe glinting in her hand, I scrambled out of bed, my legs trembling. "No, please, I don't need that." Her eyes hardened. The softness dropped. Her voice sharpened. "You need this. Don't fight me. I know what's best." When she grabbed my arm, I yanked away with every ounce of strength left in me. She moved fast, faster than I thought possible, blocking the door, the syringe raised. "You can't go to heaven if you keep resisting, Clara." Those words still ring in me, not the way she said heaven like comfort, but like a promise carved in stone. I screamed, loud, shrill, desperate. That scream saved me. Dad burst through the door, his face pale, his eyes wild. He saw Rebecca, saw the syringe, and for the first time in years I saw fury in him. He shoved her back, dragging me behind him. She lunged, screaming, driving the needle toward his throat. He blocked it, wrestled her to the ground. And even then, even pinned, even screaming, she smiled at me. By the time the police dragged her out in cuffs, my world had already cracked beyond repair. The toxicology report revealed what I had already felt in my bones. She'd been poisoning me, little by little. Thallium in my food slipping into my veins through detox blends. The syringe had been filled with something worse, something that would have shut down my body in hours. Her journals revealed her madness. She wrote about purity, about peace, about how death was the greatest gift. But here's the part no one but me remembers. The part that eats at me when the house is too quiet and the shadows stretch long. When the officers led her away, Rebecca turned her head back to me. Her eyes, calm, green, endless, locked on mine. And she started humming. The lullaby. The same lullaby she used to sing by my bedside when I was sick. And in that moment, the air around me shifted. It was like the walls bent closer, the light dimmed, the house itself leaning in to listen. Her voice wasn't just in my ears, it was inside me. Sweet, suffocating, inescapable. I never heard silence the same way again. After Rebecca was gone, the house didn't feel safe again. It didn't feel empty either. It felt like it had been changed, as if her presence had soaked into the wood and wallpaper, clinging like a stain you couldn't scrub away. For weeks I woke in the middle of the night certain I heard someone humming, the same lullaby. At first I thought it was memory, the way trauma replays itself until it carves grooves in your mind. But sometimes I heard it drifting from the hallway, faint and deliberate. Sometimes it came from the kitchen, where shadows spilled longer than they should have. Dad told me it was nightmares, that I needed therapy, that it wasn't real. But his face betrayed him. He never slept soundly either. I would hear him pacing downstairs at 3 a.m, stopping to listen, like he was waiting for something. One night, I woke to the smell of lavender. My stomach turned so violently I thought I'd be sick. Lavender had been Rebecca's scent, her lotion, her hair, the sachets she tucked into dresser drawers. I sat up in bed, my skin crawling, certain she was in the room. The air was heavy, thick, almost oily. When I whispered, "Dad?" there was no answer. But in the corner of the room by the closet, the shadows shifted like someone was standing there. I tried to tell myself it was imagination, but then I saw a pale outline, like the glint of copper hair. And soft, low, came the humming. I screamed. Dad rushed in, flicking on the light. The corner was empty. He held me tight, saying over and over, it's okay, she's gone." But I could still smell lavender clinging to the air. After that, the house wasn't just uncomfortable, it was hostile. Doors creaked open even when locked. My drawings slipped from their frames and scattered across the floor as if torn down by unseen hands. Once, when I opened the fridge, every jar, every bottle, reeked of bitter chemicals. I gagged and dropped one, watching greenish liquid seep across the tiles like bile. Dad swore he smelled nothing. He started looking at me differently, pity in his eyes, fear in the way he asked if I'd taken my medication. Maybe I was unraveling. Or maybe Rebecca hadn't left at all. Her trial ended with her being declared unfit, committed to a state hospital, but I didn't believe the bars or walls could hold her. When I closed my eyes, she was there, sitting by my bed, syringe in hand, her smile soft and endless. At school, whispers spread. People had read pieces of her journals in the news. They called me Angel Girl, muttering that I was supposed to die, that she almost sent me to heaven. Some kids hummed lullabies when I walked past. I pretended it didn't bother me, but inside, the cracks widened. The worst came one evening in autumn. Dad was working late. I was alone in the house, curled up with a book, trying to drown out the silence. The power flickered, then cut. I sat frozen in the dark, heart pounding. And then faintly, the refrigerator door creaked open. I forced myself to stand, to grab a flashlight. The beam cut through the kitchen, and my stomach dropped. The fridge door stood wide open, light spilling out, and on the top shelf sat Rebecca's leather medical kit, the one the police had taken as evidence. I staggered back, dropped the flashlight. Darkness swallowed the room, and in that darkness, the humming began again, closer than ever, as if someone leaned right against my ear. "You'll be strong again soon, Angel." The next thing I remember is Dad shaking me awake on the kitchen floor, the flashlight rolling beside me. The fridge was shut. The kit was gone. He told me I must have passed out, maybe from stress, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. He wanted to believe it wasn't real as badly as I wanted to believe it was. Weeks blurred after that. Therapy, medication, whispered reassurances that everything would be okay. But the house whispered louder. The lullaby threaded through the vents at night. The mirrors fogged when I showered. Words etched into the glass. Heaven waits. I stopped eating. Every bite tasted like thallium. My body grew weaker again, my hair brittle. Doctors said malnutrition. I said Rebecca. One night I confronted Dad. I told him I couldn't stay in that house. I told him Rebecca wasn't gone, that she was still with us somehow. He slammed his hand on the table, shouting for the first time in years, "She is not here, Clara. She is sick, she is locked away, and she cannot hurt you anymore." But his voice cracked on the last word, and I knew he didn't believe himself. Later that night, I woke to find him sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, staring at nothing. In front of him sat a mug of tea. Steam curled up, smelling faintly of lavender. I whispered, "Dad?" But he didn't answer. His eyes were glassy, far away. For one sickening moment I thought he was gone too, that she'd taken him. When he finally blinked and looked at me, he whispered something that froze me cold. Sometimes I hear her too. After that, neither of us pretended anymore. We lived like strangers in a haunted house, waiting for the next sign. The climax came on a winter night, snow muffling the world outside. I was lying in bed when the humming grew louder than ever, swelling until it drowned out my heartbeat. My lamp flickered, then died, and standing at the foot of my bed was Rebecca. Not flesh, not shadow, something between. Her copper hair floated as if underwater. Her eyes glowed green, wide, endless. In her hand she held the syringe, the pale blue liquid shimmering. "You're tired, Angel. Let me help you." I couldn't scream. My throat locked. My body trembled. She leaned closer, the needle almost brushing my skin. I smelled lavender, thick and suffocating. Then the door burst open. Dad stood there, wild-eyed, shouting her name. She turned, smiled at him, and for a moment I swear he saw her too, because his face went ashen, his body trembling. He rushed forward, but the room erupted in darkness, the bulb above us shattering. I felt a sting on my arm, burning, searing. I thrashed, sobbed, until suddenly the air lightened. She was gone. On my arm, a thin red welt marked where the needle had grazed me. No wound, no blood, just the mark. We left the house the next day, packed what we could, abandoned the rest. Dad sold it to strangers who smiled at the picket fence and the maples out front. I don't know if they heard the humming after they moved in. I don't want to know. Years have passed, but Rebecca never left me. Sometimes I wake in new apartments, new cities, smelling lavender in the air. Sometimes I find words etched faintly into my mirror. Sometimes late at night I hear the lullaby again. And the question gnaws at me, the one no therapy, no medication, no time can erase. Was Rebecca just a broken woman who tried to kill me? Or did something far darker enter my life through her and refuse to let go? I may never know. But when the humming begins again, soft and sweet in the silence, I wonder if maybe one night I won't fight anymore. Maybe I'll let her finish what she started. And maybe, just maybe, she was right. Maybe heaven really is waiting. I was 8 years old the first time I realized my life didn't belong to me, though I didn't have the words for it then. What I felt was simpler, sharper. The air in our house wasn't just heavy, it was watchful, as if something unseen was pressing down on me every time I took a breath. And at the center of it all was my mother, Samantha Harper, though the world just called her Sam. To me, she was always Mom, but she was never just Mom. She was a storm made of perfume, discipline, and unspoken rules, a storm that never passed. She used to be a dancer, a real one, with trophies, ribbons, glossy photographs of her frozen mid-pirouette and poses that looked inhumanly perfect. I'd catch her sometimes in the kitchen, her spine straight, one arm floating upward as though the music still lived in her bones. She never said it outright, but I understood. She had given up the stage for me, and in return, I was supposed to live the life she lost. She told me softly, almost like a lullaby. "Every second counts, Isabel. Your future depends on your dedication." At first, I believed her. What child wouldn't? I wanted her smile, the faint, stingy curve of her lips that felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. But her smiles were rare, expensive things. Every plie, every meal, every waking hour became the coins I paid to earn them. The Lyric Performing Arts Academy was my entire world before I had even finished 3rd grade. I loved to dance, but I also loved Saturday pancakes, sleepovers, and catching fireflies with friends. Those were luxuries quickly stolen. Rehearsals, private lessons, and auditions filled every corner of my days, and slowly, the outside world blurred. Sometimes I wondered what a normal family looked like. I watched girls at school who laughed too loudly, who ate cafeteria pizza without counting bites, who went to birthday parties and told secrets in hushed whispers. I wasn't jealous at first, just curious. But by 10, curiosity had hardened into a hollow ache. Even at that age, I noticed something strange that had nothing to do with Mom. At night, lying in bed, I felt eyes on me. Not hers. She was usually down the hall, scribbling in notebooks or ironing my leotards. No, these were colder, heavier. Sometimes I'd shift under the blankets and swear the floorboards creaked just outside my door. When I turned on the lamp, no one was there. But the air would feel relieved, as though something had stepped back into the shadows. By 12, the rules were carved into stone. Meals were weighed on kitchen scales. My closet organized into color-coded outfits. Mom approved every friendship, every word that left my mouth. Any deviation earned silence, or worse, her quiet, patient lectures about sacrifice. I learned early that her love was conditional, measured by my obedience and performance. One afternoon, I begged her to let me go to a birthday party. "It's just one evening," I pleaded, clutching the invitation like it was oxygen. She set down her notebook and narrowed her eyes. "One evening off schedule could ruin months of progress. Your friend will understand. Life isn't about indulgence. It's about achievement." Her voice was calm, even tender, but underneath it was iron. I went to my room and cried, realizing that my childhood was slipping through my fingers, piece by piece, replaced by her choreography. At the academy, I began noticing something else. Mirrors didn't just reflect me. Sometimes when the practice room was empty and I was stretching alone, I'd catch a flicker of movement in the glass. My reflection's smile would come a fraction late, or her arm would hold a line longer than mine. Once I swore she turned her head after I'd already looked away. I told myself it was exhaustion, hallucination, but it never fully stopped. The first real crack came when I was 15, during a regional competition. I practiced until my feet blistered raw, until my body felt like it wasn't mine anymore. Backstage, Mom hovered inches behind me, correcting every imperfection. "Bend that wrist more, smile wider, remember? You're the star." But I wasn't. Not that night. Lila Benson was. She danced with something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Her body was fluid, effortless, as though no one invisible pressed against her. She won the lead role. I clapped for her. I forced a smile. But Mom's face darkened, tightening into something mask-like. Later at the after-party, I saw her hand hover over Lila's cup of punch. A shake of powder, subtle as a breath. My heart froze. "Mom, what are you doing?" I whispered. Her reply was calm, steady. "We'll make this right. For you. For your future." Lila collapsed before midnight. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull her up, to call for help. But Mom's eyes pinned me in place, calm and knowing, as though the house itself was watching too. I stood there silent, complicit, the applause that followed my performance the next day ringing hollow. After that night, shadows thickened. At home, whispers threaded through the walls at night, low and rhythmic. Every second counts. Every second counts. My reflection grew stranger, more independent. Once, brushing my hair, I saw it grin when I hadn't. Another time, mid-pirouette, it finished the turn even after I'd stumbled. I tried to tell Mom. "I feel strange," I whispered. Her eyes sharpened. "Strange how?" "Like someone else is here," I admitted. She smiled faintly, not comfort, but warning. "Good. That means you're finally listening. The house is molding you, shaping you. Don't fight it, Isabel. This is what greatness feels like." Greatness? No. It felt like suffocation. The national competition became my breaking point. Backstage, Mom's hands shook as she tightened my costume. Her eyes glistened with something close to madness. "No one will take this from you again," she whispered. That night as I danced, I felt something press into me, guiding my limbs, stretching my body beyond its limits. Every move was too precise, too sharp, as if invisible hands were controlling me. When the music ended, I collapsed, sobbing on the floor. The judges applauded. The audience roared. But in the mirror at the back of the stage, my reflection didn't collapse. She kept dancing. I screamed. No one else saw it. No one else ever does. Afterward, life carried on, at least on the surface. Mom ironed, hummed, corrected. The academy praised my performances. But I knew something had changed. The house no longer just felt heavy. It felt alive. And Mom was no longer entirely my mother. Sometimes late at night, I heard two voices in her room, hers and another, lower, coaxing. Sometimes, when she looked at me, her pupils dilated until her eyes were nearly black. She still whispered the mantra, "Every second counts, Isabel." But now I heard it everywhere, in the walls, in my chest, in my own mind. I keep dancing. I have to. If I stop, the whispers grow louder, the shadows lean closer, the air crushes my lungs. I'm not sure where Mom ends and the house begins. I'm not sure where I end. The worst part? When I smile, sometimes the reflection smiles wider. And when I wake at night, sometimes I find myself standing in front of the mirror, arms moving in perfect arcs, whispering in a voice that isn't mine. Every second counts. Every second counts. I don't know if I'll ever escape her dream, or the house's hunger, or the reflection waiting for me to stop resisting. But I do know one thing. The stage is waiting. And it doesn't matter if it's me or the thing wearing my face. Someone will dance. I never trusted the silence in that house. It looked ordinary enough from the road, a weather-beaten farmhouse on the outskirts of Sawyer, South Dakota, its siding cracked, its porch sagging slightly, wind chimes swaying when the prairie winds blew. To strangers passing by, it might have seemed peaceful, a picture of rural quiet, snow drifting across the yard in winter, smoke curling from the chimney, cicadas buzzing in the summer dusk. But inside, the air was thick, heavy, like something unseen had settled into the walls and didn't intend to leave. Every corner held a shadow that didn't belong, and every silence carried weight. My father, Keith Carter, was a quiet man. Too quiet. He worked long shifts at the factory in town, came home smelling of oil and liquor, and disappeared into his recliner as though it could swallow him whole. He barely spoke, barely moved, sometimes barely even blinked, his eyes fixed on the television, though I never saw him following the programs. He seemed content to let the world, and us, slide past him, which left Linda, my stepmother, in complete control. She wore her mask well. In public, she was the perfect hostess, waving to neighbors with a sweet smile, inviting church friends for dinner, serving pie on china plates. But that warmth was paper thin. At home, she ruled like a warden, her gaze sharp, her punishments sharper. A dirty dish left in the sink, a wrinkle in a shirt, a smudge on the glass. Each mistake drew her fury. Sometimes it was yelling, sometimes slaps, sometimes worse. Her punishments left bruises you couldn't always see. Hours locked in the freezing garage, nights trapped in the closet where the air felt too tight to breathe, or the sting of her cigarette pressed against my skin when I was too slow. I tried to protect my younger brother Sam and little sister Rosie, keeping their mistakes hidden, distracting Linda when I could. But fear had a way of seeping in through cracks, no matter how hard I tried to shield them. Fear became the background noise of our lives, like the faint hum of the refrigerator or the ticking of the old kitchen clock, always there, impossible to forget. And yet what haunts me most isn't Linda's cruelty. It's the house itself. There were moments, quiet moments, when Linda was gone and Dad was sunk deep in his chair. when I could hear it. The creak of floorboards upstairs when no one was there. The sound of something brushing the walls inside the closet. The way the shadows in the corners seemed to stretch just slightly longer than they should. I told myself it was my imagination, the paranoia of a child desperate for escape. But deep down, I knew better. The house wasn't just holding us, it was feeding off us. The first time I realized it, I was 12. Linda had shoved me into the hall closet for whispering to Rosie at bedtime. It was pitch dark inside, the smell of dust and cedar pressing in. I pressed my palms against the door, breathing fast, when I felt something else there. Not Linda, not Sam, not Rosie. Something crouched low in the dark, its breath hot and damp against my cheek. I froze. I didn't scream. Screaming never helped. I just shut my eyes, prayed for the door to open. When Linda finally dragged me out hours later, my face streaked with tears. I didn't tell anyone what I had felt. I knew they wouldn't believe me. And worse, I knew the house would be listening. Years passed, and the fear only deepened. I found small ways to cling to control. Hiding snacks, writing secret letters to a pen pal whose name I never dared to speak aloud, sneaking outside when the wind drowned out the sound of my footsteps. Those stolen moments in the cold, the crunch of snow under my feet, the brush of wind on my face. Those were the only times I felt the house release me. But I always had to go back, and the moment I stepped through the door, I felt its grip return. One night in January, Linda found my letters. I'd tucked them behind a drawer, stupidly thinking she wouldn't notice, but she did. She always did. She stood there in the kitchen, the light above her flickering, her eyes glittering with something darker than fury as she held the crumpled papers. "You think you can hide from me?" she hissed, her voice low and sharp. I tried to answer, but my throat closed up. Sam and Rosie watched from behind the couch, their eyes wide, trembling. Linda tore the letters into strips, letting them fall like snow to the floor. "You're worthless. Nothing without me." Then the lights flickered again. Not just the bulb in the kitchen, all of them. The whole house shuddered, like something heavy had shifted inside its bones. A sound echoed through the walls, low and hollow, like laughter dragged through wood. Linda froze just for a second, her face paling before she turned on me again. But I had seen it, the way even she looked afraid. That was the moment I knew. We couldn't stay. I whispered to Sam and Rosie when Linda stomped into the kitchen, still muttering, still slamming drawers. "We're leaving tonight. Grab your things. Quiet." Their eyes met mine. Fear, yes, but also trust. They believed me. We packed fast. Socks, jackets, blankets. My hands shook as I shoved clothes into a bag. My heart raced so loudly I was sure the house could hear it. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind against the windows felt like a warning. I swear I saw the shadows move, stretching toward us, reaching. We waited until Linda was clattering dishes in the sink, then crept to the back door. I opened it slowly, the hinges whining. The night air rushed in, icy and sharp, burning my lungs. Sam's hand slipped into mine. Rosie pressed against my side. The snow crunched under our feet, louder than I wanted, like bones breaking. We hurried across the yard, the wind cutting through us, but the fear of being caught was worse than the cold. Behind us, the house loomed black, its windows glowing faintly as though eyes were watching. And I swear in the rush of the wind I heard it, my name whispered from the dark. We ran until the glow of a gas station broke the horizon. Relief surged in me, hot and dizzy. We stumbled inside, half frozen, babbling to the attendant. "Please, help. We need the police." But even as warmth filled my body, even as the officers arrived and Linda and Dad were taken away in handcuffs, I couldn't shake it. I couldn't shake the feeling that the house hadn't let us go, that it had followed us. The years that came after were supposed to be safe. Foster care, therapy, school. A warm house with people who didn't raise their voices, didn't slam doors, didn't punish us for breathing wrong. I should have felt free, but nights were the worst. I woke drenched in sweat, convinced I heard Linda's voice calling me from the dark, or the sound of breathing in the closet, or the faint creak of floorboards outside my door. I told my therapist and she nodded, said it was trauma, my mind replaying patterns of fear. Maybe she was right. But sometimes when the lights flickered, when the shadows stretched just a little too far, I wondered if it wasn't just memory. Because no matter how far I ran, I couldn't forget the truth. The house listened. The house absorbed us. The house wanted us. And some nights, when the wind howls just right, I swear I can still hear it calling me home. I was 13 the first time I realized the world inside my house was more dangerous than the world outside. I didn't know it in that exact moment, not in words, but my body knew. My skin knew. My bones knew. The air inside those walls had changed, and though no one else seemed to notice, I did. My name is Maya, and if you believe that children imagine monsters where there are none, I'm here to tell you that sometimes the monster doesn't lurk in closets or under beds. It smiles across the dinner table, wears perfume that smells like lilacs, and whispers things you're not supposed to hear in the middle of the night. We lived in Elmgate, Oregon, a small town with wide sidewalks, front porches, and oak trees that bent over the streets like guardians. My life used to feel predictable, boring even, until it didn't anymore. My mom died in 2019, so suddenly it still feels like I imagined it sometimes. She was stirring sauce on the stove one second, then she was gone, dropped right there on the linoleum. They said it was an aneurysm, nothing anyone could have done, but knowing that didn't make the emptiness smaller. After that, my dad was more shadow than man. He went to work, he came home, he microwaved food that tasted like cardboard, and he stared at the TV with a hollow look in his eyes until he fell asleep. That year, I grew up in ways I wasn't ready for. I fed Eli, my baby brother, changed his diapers, rocked him when he cried, and made sure Ryan, who was 10, brushed his teeth and finished his math worksheets. I pretended to be older than I was, but sometimes I'd go into the bathroom, lock the door, and let myself cry quietly so no one would hear. And then came Lena. She arrived like perfume in a stale room, sharp, intrusive, filling every corner before you could blink. Dad met her at a grief support group, though I always wondered if she really belonged there. She said she was there for her sister, but her eyes didn't hold the kind of grief that I'd grown used to seeing in other people. The first time she came over, she wore a navy blouse and white jeans, clothes too perfect for a small-town kitchen, and her smile was so wide it looked painted on. It wasn't just that I didn't like her. It was the way every hair on my arms stood up when she looked at me, as if my body recognized something my brain couldn't name yet. At first, it was small things. Passive-aggressive comments dropped like stones into quiet water. "You ever think about brushing that?" she asked me once, running her eyes over my tangled hair when Dad wasn't in the room. Or, "Girls your age shouldn't be so bossy," when I reminded Ryan to clear his plate. They were little cuts, the kind you could almost convince yourself weren't intentional, except the way her eyes gleamed told me otherwise. Dad didn't notice. He looked at her like she was sunlight after years of storm. She cooked, she laughed at his stale jokes, she posed with Eli for pictures and posted them online with captions like "Dogger, bonus mom," and "grateful." Within months, her toothbrush appeared in the bathroom. Her jackets hung in the hallway. By the 6th month, Dad announced she was moving in. He expected us to be happy. Ryan and I nodded, but I felt something icy crawl into my stomach. That's when the strangeness began. One afternoon, I came home early, half day at school for conferences. The house was silent, no sound of cartoons, no babbling from Eli. I crept upstairs and there she was, Lena standing at Dad's locked dresser drawer, holding a slip of paper, whispering to herself. Her head snapped toward me when the floorboard groaned. That too bright smile again. "Oh, hey, Maya," she said, voice sugary. Just looking for extra blankets. Your dad said they might be in here. But everyone in the house knew blankets lived in the linen closet. That was the first time I realized she could lie without hesitation, as easily as breathing. Later that week, I caught her coming out of Ryan's room. When I asked what she was doing, she didn't blink. Opening a window. It's stuffy in there. But both windows were shut, the air stale. When I told Dad, he sighed, rubbed his face, and asked me to just try for his sake. It felt like he was asking me to swallow poison and pretend it was water. The breaking point came 2 nights ago. Dad, Ryan, and I went to a school event while Lena stayed with Eli. Something gnawed at me the whole evening, so when we got back, I told Dad I was heading to the library, but instead circled home quietly through the garage. From the hallway, I heard it. Eli screaming, not his normal cry, but raw, terrified shrieks that cut straight through me. And over it, Lena's voice, sharp, furious. "Shut up. Shut the hell up." I rushed into the kitchen. She was standing over him in his high chair, fists clenched, face twisted with rage. When she saw me, she jolted like she'd been caught in a crime. "Maya," she said too brightly. "He's just fussy, Get away from him." The words tore out of me before I could think. She froze, her smile twitching at the corners, then walked out without another word. I scooped up Eli, pressed him to my chest, and when Dad came home, I told him everything. For the first time, he didn't laugh it off. His face went pale. That night, they argued behind their bedroom door. Raised voices, silence, the sound of something breaking. I thought maybe he was finally waking up. But then, at 2:30 a.m., I woke with the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I opened my eyes, and there, by my door, was a figure. Female. Still. Watching me. My breath caught. I sat up, heart battering, and the figure turned, slipping out, shutting the door. I threw it open. Nothing in the hallway, except Dad's bedroom door closing softly. I burst in, shaking him awake. She was in my room. Lena blinked at me from the bed, face flushed like someone pulled from a dream. "What?" "I was sleeping. You must have dreamed it." But I knew what I'd seen. Her eyes, when they locked on mine, weren't pretending anymore. No charm, no warmth, just cold, sharp calculation. After that, I started locking my door at night, shoving a chair under the handle. I didn't care if it looked paranoid. I was paranoid for a reason. The next day, Dad told me Lena was going to stay with her sister for a while. Relief cracked through me. But that night, Ryan came into my room, pale, shaking. She came into my room. He whispered. Last night, I was awake. She stood by my bed and whispered something. I don't know what she said, but she kept smiling. The next morning, I found a notebook in Lena's drawer, hidden under folded sweaters. Page after page, the same line repeated. She's the one who's in the way. Sometimes neat, sometimes jagged and frantic, but always the same words, over and over. I took pictures, showed Dad. His face drained of color, but he didn't say much, just that he'd take care of it. That night, Lena packed her bags and left. No goodbye. No explanation. I wanted to believe that was the end. But even now, when the baby monitor crackles at night, sometimes I hear something that doesn't belong. A laugh, a whisper, a voice like hers, soft and cold. I check every time. There's never anyone there. But I know what I saw. And I'll never forget the way she smiled. I was 12 years old when my mother vanished, and though everyone said she left of her own will, I swear to this day that the house itself swallowed her whole. That thought never left me, not even after decades had passed. It wasn't the kind of disappearance you could blame on affairs, unhappiness, or midlife crisis. There was no suitcase dragged out in the middle of the night, no whispers of another man waiting with his headlights off down the road. She was just gone. One evening her voice was in the house, the next morning it wasn't, and all that remained was the echo. My father told me she was unhappy, Ellie. People get tired of carrying weight they didn't sign up for. But when he said it, he didn't meet my eyes. He kept them fixed on his coffee mug, swirling black liquid as if it might arrange itself into the explanation I wanted. But I'd heard things, sounds you can't scrub away, her muffled sobs leaking from the bathroom vents, the heavy thud of his footsteps pacing until dawn, his voice dropping to a low hiss whenever he thought I was asleep. And sometimes, when she tried to speak, and he cut her off with nothing more than silence, I felt the walls lean in closer as though they enjoyed watching. By 15, he had found someone new, Denise. Blonde in that brittle, processed way women on reality TV shows looked blonde. 10 years younger than my mother. A nurse, with the soft voice of someone who had mastered sounding kind in public, but carried a sharper tone in private. She moved in quickly, too quickly, 3 months after their first date. The house changed after she arrived. My father used to sit with me late at night watching sci-fi movies, both of us talking about what the future might hold. He used to call me his brilliant girl, the one who could fix anything broken. But once Denise filled the rooms with her perfume and her neat hospital white scrubs, I became inconvenient. My father's eyes glazed when I spoke, and if Denise happened to frown, he nodded along, as if my existence itself were an argument against her comfort. That was when the real Denise came out. "I'm not your mother, Ellie," she hissed, her back turned while she scrubbed a spotless counter until her knuckles went white. "Don't look at me like I owe you anything." Another time, when I had the flu, I stumbled down the hallway, vomit splattering the hardwood. She handed me a roll of paper towels and a spray bottle so harsh the fumes burned my throat. No one wants a weak, disgusting child in their house. That word, disgusting, followed me like a shadow. When I told my father what she said, what she did, he looked at me as though I were telling him the sky wasn't real. "She works 12-hour shifts to support us, Ellie. Maybe if you weren't so cold." That was the night I realized I was on my own. By 18, I left. 3 days after graduation, I enlisted. The army was brutal, but it was freedom disguised as discipline. Sandstorms, cracked lips, nights where sleep came in shallow gulps. It all felt like penance for surviving that house. After that came college, an engineering degree, a marriage. Marcus, kind, patient Marcus, was the first man who saw me without trimming me down to his preference. We bought land in Pennsylvania, acres of old farmland, the kind of quiet place where the past is supposed to fade into the trees. But on the back half of the property stood a rotting, vine-swallowed farmhouse. Locals said it dated back to the Civil War, abandoned after the family that lived there collapsed in on itself. Suicides, starvation, whispered curses. We planned to tear it down. I avoided looking at it, because every time I did, I felt that same tightening in my chest I had felt at 12. Standing outside the bathroom door while my mother cried, I never saw my father again. Not at my wedding, not at my graduation, not even when the local paper printed my name after I won an award. He vanished, just as my mother had, though by choice. Marcus once asked, "Do you ever want to reach out to him?" I shook my head. He made his choice. It was 2 months ago when I saw her. Denise. She was at a mall 2 hours from home, inside Bella's, a lingerie boutique with crystal lights and velvet stools. She was still clinging to youth. Tight jeans, overarched brows, and that same brittle beauty stretched across her face like saran wrap. Her phone glowed constantly in her hand. She didn't recognize me. Why would she? I was no longer the fragile teenager she once crushed beneath her heel. I had Marcus now, short black hair, calloused palms, posture that spoke of self-possession. But when I saw her, something old and feral coiled inside me. "Excuse me," I said, voice casual. "Do you know if the East Side garage is still open? I can give you a ride if you're heading that way." She blinked, smiled politely. "Sure, that'd be lovely." Just like that, she stepped into my car. What she didn't feel was the needle. The tiny sting buried in her thigh once the mall faded behind us, once the road narrowed into pines, once the air turned heavy with the smell of soil. By the time the property line appeared, she was unconscious. The farmhouse was waiting. The ivy curled like veins across its skin, the windows sunken black. Inside, the air carried that sweet, sour scent of mold and dust, and beneath it, something sharper, metallic, like rusting chains. I bolted an iron bed to the floorboards. When Denise opened her eyes and realized she was bound there, her lips trembled. "Is this about money? If you let me go?" "No," I said, placing a bowl of food in her lap. "It's about the truth." For days, she fought. She screamed until her voice shredded, kicked until her ankles bled, cursed me in a dozen vicious tones. But no one heard. No one came. And all the while, I kept her alive, fed her, washed her, tended to her, because death wasn't the punishment. Living was. The house seemed to lean closer as I worked. Its walls groaned at night. Its floorboards sighed beneath me as though approving. Once, when Denise's voice cracked into a sob, I swore I heard another voice answering her soft and low from the beams above. I froze, staring upward into the darkness, but there was nothing. "No one's coming," I told her one night. "My father's dead. Heart attack. 2 months ago." Her mask cracked for the first time. "He loved me." "No," I whispered. "He tolerated you." I wanted her broken. I fed her lard, syrup, potatoes drowning in salt until her body softened, her glow drained away. I watched her eyes dim. To sharpen the knife, I buried her reputation too. Burner accounts smeared her name. Flyers painted her as a liar, a thief. She was erased before she even died. And then I brought the mirror. When she saw herself, bloated, gray, stripped of beauty, she whimpered like a child. "Eat," I told her, pressing the bowl closer, "or I'll make it worse." She obeyed. That obedience was the moment I knew she remembered me. Her swollen lips parted. "Your mother was weak." It should have shattered me, but instead, it steadied me. I leaned closer, brushing her hair with fingers gentler than they should have been. "And now you'll know what weakness feels like." The belt tightened around her throat without resistance. When it was done, I poured chemicals over her, wrapped her in plastic, and buried her beneath the boards. The demolition crew arrived 2 days later. "Whole place is collapsing," the driver said. "You're doing the right thing." "Yes." I nodded. It was time to bury the past. The farmhouse fell, swallowed by dust, debris, boards, bones. All gone. A landfill became her coffin. Marcus believed the house was unsafe, that it reminded me too much of childhood. He never asked more. He planted flowers with me over the ruins. Tulips, marigolds, roses. A bright little garden, dew catching between my toes each morning. But sometimes when I walk there alone, the air shifts. The dew chills into ice. The garden hushes as though listening. And I hear it. Her voice, not screaming but whispering. Denise, my mother, maybe both. Maybe the house itself. Disgusting. The word curls against my ear, warm as breath. I tell myself it's the wind. I tell myself monsters don't linger, that I ended what needed ending. But when I stand barefoot in the garden, I swear the earth breathes beneath me, slow and patient, waiting. And then comes the thought that roots itself deeper every morning. What if I never truly escaped that house and all I did was move its walls inside my own skin?